Right. Yeah, the purpose of tonight really is just to go over what's needed to be able to do a remote demo. I think with the sort of events in the world at the moment, a lot of people are looking at this as individuals, as clubs, or even as small groups. I mean, it lends itself obviously to meetings like this. People are doing remote demos. You can do a demo to a club and they project it on a big screen for a group of people. You can do it in isolation where you're actually broadcasting to any number of individuals in their own homes. And you could even use it for a sort of a one-to-one tuition or workshop sessions, or even you and a small group doing a workshop session. So it's got various possibilities, and I think although the technology, I've just written this article, like I said, this sort of technology, and technically it's been around for getting on for 30 years, nearly 30 years. Back in the mid-90s is probably when sort of the video over the internet started, but things have moved on a lot since then, as I'm sure you'll all agree. The connections are faster, the technology's better, the cameras are better, and so are the computers that run it all. So yeah, things have certainly moved on in the last 25 odd years when this has been a possibility. And although the technology has been around, a lot of people haven't used it, just haven't had the need to. But I think with the COVID crisis and lockdowns happening in various parts of the world, all of a sudden everybody wants it. So yeah, now's the time. I mean, I bought the cameras to do this, I don't know, it was 18 months, 2 years ago, something like that. Had a play with them and then sort of put them to one side and got sidetracked with other projects. So never went any farther. But I suppose that put me in a good position when we did start this, because I got the cameras at least, and those have been very hard to get hold of late, because everybody wants to have a camera to be able to communicate with all the friends they can't visit, and family, etc., and sometimes work meetings, things like that. So all the online retailers of webcams have been out of stock for some time on most of them. I think there are perhaps one or two here or there to be had if you look hard enough, but certainly the popular models very difficult to find at the moment. But no doubt that'll change once they catch up with the supplies. In terms of, that's probably a good place to start actually on the cameras. What you need is a camera. A webcam is ideal, just plugging it in on a USB port. There are ways of using other cameras. I mean, I've just downloaded some software from Canon, and I can now plug my Canon digital SLR into my laptop via the USB connection and use it as a webcam. And that gives me the advantage of control over focus and zoom on an optical zoom over a good range, depending on which lens I use. And so that makes it quite versatile, but it's probably not the camera I'm going to use most of the time, because it's big and expensive, and I don't want to get it covered with dust unless I really need to. I've got at the moment 3 webcams to use in here, so that should cover most of what I need to do. But the basic setup, you need one camera. So we'll start there. I mean, webcams these days are up to 4K resolution. The mainstream ones, I suppose, if you want to call them that, are 1080 resolution. The one I'm using at the moment that's pointing at me is a 720 pixel one. That's adequate for what we're doing here, because what will happen with Zoom is it will downgrade your resolution to 720 or less to broadcast it, depending on the bandwidth you've got, and system load as well, I would imagine. So you'll probably find that you're broadcasting much less than the cameras are capable of because of it. I'm just going to pull up a screen on here just to prove that concept. I'll share my screen so you can see what I'm doing. Right. I've got screens over screens and can't get to the button. Give me a second. Right, there we go. So here, the screen I'm putting in the middle is the one I want you to look at. You can see there, it says I'm looking at the statistics. This is the Zoom statistics window. If you go into the settings on Zoom, this is what you'll see. And it's got a few tabs at the top, and it says overall CPU usage, I'm at 12%, overall nearly 60%. So that's telling me how the performance of the PC is going. Memory usage as well. And then we've got audio and video. Not a lot to show on the audio, there's nothing there. Probably because the audio is actually coming in through OBS along with the video, so I've not got a separate audio channel into Zoom. That's probably why there's nothing there at all. But on video, you can see there, it says resolution 640 by 360. So my 720 pixel camera, its resolution has been halved by Zoom effectively. It's cutting it down to reduce bandwidth. And I'm receiving at less than that. It's 256 by 144, it says. So, and the frame rate is also half on the receive as it is on the send. So, and here on screen sharing, here I am actually broadcasting, so it's set at 1080 resolution. So, but it's a lot slower on the frame rate. So it's using a higher resolution, but dropping the frame rate to reduce the amount of data I'm transmitting. But that's, I'm just showing you this so you can, if you get set up and do this, you can see in there what's going on, what Zoom's actually sending. So that may be of use. Okay, so that's the little Zoom window, and to get to that screen I showed you, if you click on settings there, the settings window pops up, and down there on the left there's statistics. So that's how you get to the one I was just showing you. Okay, you can see top left corner of my screen, that's OBS, which is Open Broadcast Software. What that does is it takes all my webcam inputs and other inputs if I set them up, such as videos, slideshows, images, etc. And I can effectively compile that into a single stream. I can stream it to Facebook, YouTube, various other social media channels. But here what we're doing is we're using that effectively as another virtual webcam, and Zoom is seeing OBS as a virtual webcam, and Zoom is broadcasting what it receives from that as a virtual webcam. This little box bottom left, it says scenes. I've set up a number of scenes, abbreviated names, but they make sense to me, honest. If I click on all, what you'll see is one image, the main image, which is my side camera over there. I've got the camera sat on top of the laptop looking at me, and then an overhead on the lathe. So I've got the three cameras in a single view there. OH, as the name implies, is overhead, so that's looking at the camera. The side camera is the one over there looking at the side. Front is the little one looking at me. And then I've got overhead and side there as an inset, because those are the two I would be using as a pair for when I'm doing a demo. Really, I probably wouldn't use this one with all three often, because when I'm actually doing the demo, there's no point looking at the camera that's pointing at me. You're more interested in what's happening on the lathe. So I'm just clicking through those with the mouse. What I can also do in OBS is set up shortcuts. So I can assign any key to do any function. So if I want to look at the side camera, again on here I've used obvious things. The side camera is S. So if I press button S on my screen, I look at that. If I press O, it's the overhead camera. If I press F, it's the front camera. So I've just used letters to make it obvious to me. And if I press A, it's all cameras, and so on. So they're all common. I mean, and the overhead, if I go for P, which is the next key along, then it's overhead plus the insert. So it's just an adjacent key. But to me, it makes sense. So that's what I've done. Some people use the F keys. You've got F1, 2, 3, 4, and things like that. But because I suppose that way inclined, I'll just use the letters because I'll remember that, rather than the F keys. I think which camera is F1, it means nothing to me. F1 is just one of the keys in sequence, isn't it? So that's a way of controlling each camera. To make that slightly easier, I'm gonna switch my screen sharing off now and show you some of the bits I've got. So I'll go back to my front camera. To make all this a lot easier, yeah, I've got a lapel mic. Just a fairly cheap lavalier mic, as they call it. It's a wireless, 2.4 gigs. Little transmitter here, which is on the other end of this wire that's attached to the microphone. I just got it going down the inside of my shirt. That just clips on. I'll just clip it onto my pocket. Keep it out of the way. So when I've got my turning smock on, all the wires run down the inside of my smock, and the spare wire gets tucked into my pocket. So I've got no dangling wires. And there's an equally sort of sized piece that goes into the microphone socket on the laptop as a receiver. So I've got a transmitter and a receiver. These are rechargeable. You plug them into a USB charger to charge them up. I don't know how long it runs, but it's certainly 2 hours plus so far. I've not tested it beyond that. I really ought to. But I know it'll go at least a couple of hours because I've used it for 2.5 hours in other sessions. It would make sense if you're doing long sessions to have a spare one. My backup is I can always plug USB power into this and it will work. So that's one option, I suppose. So that's the microphone. It's worth getting one that works reasonably well, sounds reasonably good. I mean, this one, it wasn't an expensive one. I can't remember the exact price. I bought it on Amazon, I think, and it's probably 25 quid, something like that. So I didn't spend a fortune on it, but it seems to work and it seems to be reasonable quality. So I'm happy with that. You can get the ones that clip on over your ears and you've got a boom. Those are also okay. I mean, if that's what you like, do it. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, the thing I think you've got to watch with the boom mics is don't put the boom right in front of your mouth, because every time you speak or you breathe, you get a boom or a sort of heavy breathing sound. So you just got to position the mic far enough away from your mouth so you're not influencing the sound of the speech with your breathing and just opening and closing your mouth, basically. So just one to watch out for. So that's about it on the audio. I mean, as far as audio in, I'm just using the speakers on the laptop. You can plug in external speakers and position them where you need if necessary, but I've not found that necessary personally. This type of mic I've got is what I would call low gain. So because that's close to your mouth, it's picking up your sort of speech a few inches away. But because you're, let's say, a couple of foot almost from the motor on the legs when you're turning, the motor sound is not swamping out your voice. I mean, I found in here when I put my dust extractor on and do sand in the middle of the demo, that's, I don't know, 15, 20 feet away at the far end of the workshop. You can hear it, but it's not so loud that it's causing a problem for me actually making myself heard. So having that microphone close it works. And in club demos, it's the same scenario, isn't it? Most clubs use a similar setup. You've got a clip-on wireless mic. They've got a receiver somewhere that plugs into their PA system, and everybody can hear you through that. So yeah, similar sort of arrangement really. You can use wired mics, but I went for a wireless because there's I can walk around the workshop with no trailing cables. So that suits me. I've got enough wires in here already to step over. I don't want to be attached to any of them if possible. So on the keyboard and switching cameras, to make that easier, I got this. It's a little wireless keyboard. There's a little dongle that's in the bottom of this, and I plug that into a USB port, turn it on, and it just replicates all the keyboard functions. But what I've also done with this is put these 3 magnets on the back of it. I've got I'm going to just show you over here. There's a one-way lay, so you see the headstock, it's round. So you've got no flat platform on the top to put anything on. But with this keyboard, I can put it there, and it stays put. The magnets keep it where I put it. So it works for me. And I bought that on Amazon, and I think it was $12.99, something like that. I saw a few on there between 10 and 20 quid. So it's something you can buy for not a lot of money. So, but it puts the keyboard right next to where I'm turning, so it's easy for me to reach up and just switch cameras without having to walk back over to the laptop. I'll show you the layout in a minute, but my laptop is just off the end of the lathe, so it's, I don't know, 3-4 foot away. So I'd have to walk across here, press the key, and then walk back again if I wanted to switch cameras. If I hadn't got some facility to do that when I was at the lathe. In terms of internet connection, that's another thing you've got to bear in mind. The first session I did in here, I was connected just by Wi-Fi. And I found it wasn't quite good enough. I was getting a good throughput when it was connected, but it wasn't reliable enough. It dropped out a couple of times. So I decided it just wasn't consistent. So I was considering actually running an Ethernet cable from here up to where my router is, which is upstairs, and that would amount drilling holes in a couple of walls to do it. And yeah, I was going to do it, but then I thought, well, actually no. In other parts of the house, I've got mains powered repeaters. I've got a transmitter plugged into the router by a cable and 2 or 3 receivers in the house. So I thought I'll just buy another receiver. So I've got another receiver. And when I plugged that into my workshop, it gave me the connection, but it was at a much lower rate. And the problem there was these repeaters, they like to be on the same circuit. And I've got, as most houses, I suppose, an upstairs ring main, a downstairs ring main, and I've actually got a separate ring main in my workshop because I've got a separate consumer unit in the workshop. So that was throttling the data rate through the electrical wiring system because I'm on a separate consumer unit here. So my answer to that I'm fortunate that the workshop's actually part of the house. It's just the garage built on the side of the house. So through the door into the house, I've got a socket there, which is on one of the internal rings. I plug my extender into there, and I've got a long Ethernet cable that plugs from there into my laptop. So I just leave the door ajar for the workshop and put the cable through the door when I need it. And doing that, I get full speed connection, and it's reliable. So that's how I've got my internet connection to where I need it in the workshop. So and so far it has been rock solid. So yeah, it does the job. 7 Bluetooth. I'm just reading what Harvey's written there about 7 Bluetooth devices, but technically the keyboard isn't a Bluetooth device. It's on 2.4 gigs, but it's got its own receiver, which is on a little dongle. So it's just another USB device rather than Bluetooth. So it probably doesn't reduce your number of Bluetooth devices, but yeah, it depends on which one you buy, I suppose. Some of them are Bluetooth. I did have another little keyboard which came with like a case for a tablet, an Android tablet I had, and that's just a Bluetooth one. And I tried that on here, and it did work, but it was just not really ideal keyboard for in here. So I bought the other one, and that does the job. Right, so we've done sound and cameras. I suppose the other big problem most people are going to face is getting the cameras in the right places. And I think that's often the case with club demos. You go into some clubs and they've got cameras set up, and there might be 2 or 3 of them, but only one of them's in the right place. The other 2 are looking at things that nobody wants to see. Like in some clubs, you've got one camera to the left of the headstock, one camera to the right of the headstock. And from the viewer's perspective, if you're to the right of the headstock, you're not really seeing a lot. If you're seeing a spindle, it's a headstock between what you're doing and what's being turned, what you can see and what's being turned. And if you're doing a bowl, most of the action's on the tailstock end, isn't it, not the headstock end. So the camera really needs to be either overhead or looking from the tailstock. Is, I think, that certainly the 2 better views. I mean, I always say the perfect view is sitting on the shoulder of the guy on the stood at the lathe, but that's not entirely practical in all circumstances, isn't it? I mean, perhaps we should all have these head-mounted cameras on and do it that way, but not quite sure how practical that would be. But yeah, I've got one overhead camera and one that I put at the end of the lathe. It isn't at the moment. That's that side camera that's looking at me at the moment. So it's down that end, but not actually at the end of the lathe at the moment. But I'll use this camera that I've got on the lathe just to show you what I've got set up. So pointing it there, you can see I've got a microphone stand. There's my dust extractor stand behind it as well, but it's a microphone stand, and I'm using that because it's also got this horizontal adjustable boom. Whereas a camera tripod, they don't come with that. You can add them on many tripods, but it's not a standard thing. Whereas this was a fairly cheap microphone stand. You see down the bottom there, I've just put a couple of blanks on it just to weigh it down, so it doesn't topple. I said last time I ought to strap a brick to it or something just to give it some counterweight, but I haven't done it yet. And up there is the camera. That one's it's a Logitech C920, which is a 1080 pixel camera, but I've got them configured to actually output at 720 because, as I said earlier, Zoom doesn't use more than that. And you can see the camera is actually attached to the arm by a couple of bits. Being a microphone stand, the thread's wrong. It's a 3/8 thread, so I've got an adapter there that goes from 3/8 down to a 1/4 inch UNC, which is the camera tripod thread. Here, I've got a camera gimbal. If I slacken this nut, it allows rotation of that gimbal. And at the top here, you can see there's a ball joint. And if I slacken the screw at the back, that gives me full adjustment of the ball joint. So between the two, I can get the camera pointing exactly where I want, which is pretty much vertically downwards up the lathe. So when that's sighted, it looks like, I mean, these cameras, they do have a little tilt on it, and the lens itself will tilt on the stand. So you've got a little bit of adjustment up and down on the actual camera itself. So that's one of them. The other one I'll put over. This is the side camera I was looking at earlier. So you can see there, it's the camera on the top. It's a similar sort of gimbal, but just a smaller one this time. Again, thread adapter, and I've got this one just vertical. But I've got the adjustment here to extend that out horizontally if I want to use it as a boom as well. So that's a useful thing. These little gimbals, there's one of them. I've just bought some more. These are $7.99 for 2 on Amazon. And this one's only got 1 screw. And if I undo the screw, just give me a sec. I'm just going to put this camera down, point it that way, so it's not going to stay put. I'll put it back on the back of the laptop and hold it up. Right, so here, this gimbal has just got the 1 screw, and if I slacken the screw, that gives me rotation and the rotation of the ball at the top. You can see on one side it's got a slot, so that ball drops into the slot and will then be at 90 degrees to the direction of the boom. So they're quite good for just getting the camera exactly where you want them to be, because most webcams have got a little bit of adjustment up and down, but not as much as you get on one of those. And for $7.99 for 2, it just simplifies life, basically. It makes it easy. It's just a tripod thread at the bottom, tripod thread at the top. So you stick it on top of whatever you're doing and stick your camera on top of that. That is assuming that your camera's got a tripod thread. Those C920s do. The little camera I'm looking at the moment, the one that's looking at me, doesn't. It's just a standard webcam that it's a few years old now, but it's one of the Microsoft ones. And it's intended as a desktop webcam, so no reason for it to have a tripod thread, I suppose. But as I said, they're 1/4 inch UNC thread, so you can always glue a UNC nut or even a bit of wood with a nut set into it to the bottom of your camera if you needed a tripod thread. Or some of these microphone stands come with like a conical holder for your handheld mics, the big sort of mics you see on stage. And some of them also come with a clip, so you could possibly, if you've got one of those, use the clip just to clip the camera to it. So you might not need the tripod thread on it anyway. It all depends on what you've got with your method of holding it up. But seeing other people's setups, some have got articulated arms screwed to the wall, things coming down from the ceiling. Really, it's whatever works for you. I mean, I've just set up all what I've got here. I can bring the cameras and all the stands in, put it where I want it, and when I finish, take it all out again. So there's nothing left in the workshop when I'm not actually using it here. It's all removable. So I've not got a huge amount of space in here, so I don't want anything big that's got to stay in here really. And this suits my way of working, I suppose. I can move the cameras where I need them, and it seems to work. So for what I've got, that seems to do the job. The microphone stands, I think you can get those for not a huge amount of money, 20 quid, something like that. These might have been less than that, I can't remember now. They were bought a few years ago. And the little thread adapters, a couple of quid to go from the microphone thread to the camera tripod thread. Right, okay, let's carry on then. So what questions have we got so far?
Okay, Martin Clarkson started this off. So are you running OBS on the computer in the background on the same computer, or two computers, or two screens?
It's what I've got here is one laptop, one screen. So I'm running everything on that. But what I'm looking at the moment is Zoom. So just the same as you are, I've got the what view do they call it? The thumbnail view or whatever it is, the gallery view. So you've got all the little windows on screen with lots of people on. So I'm not looking at what I'm outputting. I can see my window, so I can see there. But I suppose I can switch to speaker view if I want, and see what comes up on there, which at the moment is actually looking at Pat. So I don't think I've set myself to speaker view on here.
You are on my screen anyway, Paul.
All right.
We're hosting, I'd imagine that's why it's not.
Yeah, possibly. Oh, yeah, I didn't do that spotlight video. There you go. So I spotlighted it now. So now I just see everybody else's videos across the top. But before I wasn't doing that. So I can do that and still have gallery view actually. So yeah, I'll do that. But yes, one laptop running 3 cameras in on USB at the moment, and microphone, etc. All on that one on that one laptop, and it's coping. It's not a new laptop. This one's about 5 years old actually, so it's not the fastest in the world. But when I bought it, I bought a fast one. I thought I'm going to keep it for a few years, so I might as well just pay a bit more and get a decent one. So it's an i7 processor on here with 16 gigs of RAM. So it is coping. When I originally set this up, I used vMix, and initially it was running at like 90% CPU, so it was fairly high load on it. But with a bit of help from Alan Zenreich, I tweaked a few things, and also reconfigured the cameras to 720 instead of 1080, so a bit less processing power needed there, because I dropped the resolution on the cameras and it came down to 50-55%, something like that. But having played around with both vMix and OBS, I found vMix, it was just a little bit more complicated, and I found that OBS served my needs. So I did buy a license for vMix, but in the end I thought, well, yeah, I'll go with OBS, which is free. But because I ended up with a license for vMix anyway, I thought, well, it doesn't really matter either way. But yeah, I currently prefer OBS. It does what I need. I can do the picture-in-picture and set up all the other scenes and things like that, and it seems to do what I need to do with it. So that's what I'm using. So, but you might have different preferences and want to work differently, and it's worth looking at both. If you want to check out vMix, you get a 60-day free trial. So you can use it for a bit and then figure out what you want to do with it. But just bear in mind that some of the features are on a tiered subscription. So you need to buy the bigger packages to get some of the better functions. I think the free version, once your trial is up, limits you to 2 cameras. So if you want more than 2 cameras, you've got to buy at least the first stage, which costs about 50, 60 quid. Or was it 50 or $60? I forget now. But that's the sort of next one up if you want more than 2 cameras. OBS is free, and I think you can basically run as many cameras as your computer is capable of processing. So
Okay, Paul. Paul is using a laptop. Can you use, sorry, Paul is using a laptop. Can you use an iPad?
I believe you can. I mean, I'm not an Apple person. I've got a PC and Android tablet and Android phone, but Zoom will run on any of those. And if you're using a single device, I think you can use any of those, whether it's an iPad, iPhone, Android phone, whatever. They will all work. So the answer to that one is yes, you can. You can't use multiple cameras on a single tablet or phone, I don't think, but you can actually join the meeting with each of those devices individually on the same account and just switch between them in vMix. So that's the ultimate basic setup. You put, with Zoom, you put Zoom on each of those devices, you connect them up, start run the cameras on each of them, and position them where you need them, and just use one of them for audio. So that's one way of doing it without a lot of extra equipment, if that's the way you want to go. But there are limitations to it, and it's a little bit more clunky to switch between cameras in Zoom. But yes, it's doable.
Okay, Paul, thank you. How many Bluetooth devices can you attach to a laptop at the same time?
I think Harvey answered that one, didn't he? Was it 7, 8, something like that?
Well, I presume
yeah, it was 7 is the Bluetooth standard limit.
Yeah.
But they say practically 3 or 4 is about what you can actually run, depending on how much demand each device puts on you.
Yeah. Okay. And
but I think in reality, let's say you go for as many things Bluetooth as possible. You'd have a Bluetooth microphone, possibly a Bluetooth keyboard. You could probably go for Bluetooth speakers and a Bluetooth camera. So even if you have all those, that's still only 4. But realistically, most of your cameras are going to be USB.
Okay. How many devices do you have connected to your laptop, USB and Bluetooth?
I've got 3 USB cameras, all plugged in separately. I've got my wireless mic, which is just plugged into the audio input. This is one of those laptops that you've got a single plug, and it asks you when you plug it in whether it's a microphone or a speaker. So I've just told it it's a microphone, obviously. So that's not USB or Bluetooth. My speaker has just got its own transmitter receiver. The keyboard, again, has also got its own transmitter receiver. So I just plug a little dongle into one of the USB ports. But on this laptop, I have 4 USB ports. So if I plug in 3 cameras plus the dongle for the remote keyboard, that's all 4 ports used up. So if I want anything else USB, I need a hub, which is something else I've just bought. I've just bought myself a 7-port USB hub. So if I need more USB ports, I can plug that in, and then technically I've got another 7 ports. So that should be more than enough. That cost me 25 quid, I think it was. I might not need it for this, but I thought, well, the way it's going, I might. So I thought I'll buy one now. So I've got one if I need it. I use them for other things anyway, so it's always handy to have one around.
Okay, Paul. What was the software you mentioned for connecting Canon SLR to USB?
It's a Canon bespoke software. It's a beta software that Canon only released literally a few days ago as part of the COVID crisis. Let me just grab a link. I've got it on here somewhere. There it is. Right. It might not work with absolutely every camera in the Canon range, but the list is quite extensive. I can't guarantee it's all of them. But I mean, it says it's unsupported and it's only US use only, but that doesn't mean to say it doesn't work anywhere else. But I'll post the link into the chat. So that one there, it says shortstack.com. That will take you to a Canon page, and you just download it and install it. And then you plug in your SLR camera with USB. I mean, on the list is the EOS 1 cameras, the 5s, the 6s, 7s, 90, 80, 77, and then it's got EOS Rebel various models, which are the American names for some of the brands, whereas here they're called 650D, 700D, etc. There's an M50, M200, Power Shots, etc. So there's quite a long list of cameras that will work with that. Some digital cameras already have this facility. You plug in a USB cable and plug it in, and it works as a webcam. I remember I used to have, years ago, a little compact camera. I think it might have been a HP. I forget now, but it could have been HP. But that one, you just plugged it in the USB and it worked as a webcam. The one I've got now doesn't do it. I've got a little Nikon compact at the moment, and that one doesn't do it. You can plug it into USB to transfer images, but it doesn't do the webcam thing when you do it. So yeah, it depends on the camera, but it's worth looking at.
Okay, Paul, please show connecting to back of camera. I presume that's the SLR.
Is what, the back of camera?
Please show connecting to back of camera. I'm assuming, Dennis, could you just, I'm unmuting you, Dennis, one moment now.
On the webcam, how do you make the connection between the camera mail-in screw and the back of your webcam?
You mean the tripod screw?
Yes.
On these microphone stands, they come with a 3/8 thread, a 3/8 UNC thread. The standard camera tripod thread is a 1/4" UNC. So I've got an adapter on the, let me show you. Take this camera over here. Right, can you see that there? Where I'm holding here is the top of the microphone stand. The silver bit is a thread adapter that goes from 1/4 to 3/8. So it's 3/8 thread at the bottom, 1/4" at the top. So you can put your camera on top of that. This is a little camera, a tripod gimbal, and then I've got that screwed into the webcam. But all those threads going up are all 1/4" UNC, same thread, tripod thread. That makes sense?
They're all imperial sizes, Paul, yes?
They are, yes. It's all 1/4" UNC.
Okay, just clarifying that. Somebody says, try charity shop for UK for mic stands. I got one for £5, so that's obviously the UK with pounds.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, always worth a go.
Okay.
I mean, anywhere that does second-hand music gear might be a good place for microphone stands when you think about it. So yeah.
Okay.
Shop around and see what you can find.
I am looking at using Touch Portal to control camera selection. Do I need OBS or is it overkill for a simple setup?
It depends what you mean by a simple setup. I think if you've got multiple cameras, using OBS or vMix gives you more control, and you can do picture-in-picture and fades and swipes from one camera to another and things like that. So I wouldn't say it's overkill. I think it's just added functionality that is useful. Yes, I know I can probably put these cameras straight into Zoom, but what OBS adds, I think, is worth using. And it just sits there in the background, really. I mean, here all I'm doing is looking at Zoom. But when I press keys on the keyboard and switch cameras, I can do that just from pressing the keys and switching. So it gives me the simple control through OBS, and it's OBS that's doing that. But yeah, as I said earlier, if you want to stream to Facebook and YouTube and things like that, you can configure OBS to do that. So you can do that straight from OBS without using anything else.
Okay,
I've not explored that yet, but it's possible.
Okay, you're kind of covering a lot of things here, but we're coming back up, so it's just to clarify again. Has anybody tried using iPhones or pads as webcams using something like IVCam?
Yeah, I mean, Phil Irons' demo last Sunday, he was using iPhones, wasn't he? One of his devices was an iPhone, and he was using a MacBook, but with his phone as one of the cameras. And that was basically connecting over an IP connection through his local network as a remote camera. So yes, it's doable with various devices, and that there are programs to make it all link together. Yes.
Yeah. He also had an iPad as well, Paul. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't. I've got a tablet, an Android one, but not an iPad. No.
Okay. You've kind of covered this. You said you just got one today. Are you using a USB hub?
At the moment, no, but I've got one. I'm just about getting away with the number of USB ports I've got. I think this is going back to one of Alan Zenreich's talks I listened to a while ago. He recommended that you want each camera going in on a separate USB hub, effectively, a separate USB subnet, or whatever you call it. You've got, or USB bridge, I think is the terminology used. Each USB bridge is obviously doing its own processing. So if you've got each camera going into a separate one, they're doing the processing rather than it all going into the CPU and that doing the processing. So you get better performance if you've got each camera on a separate bridge. But the practicalities are, especially with a laptop, you probably can't do a lot about it. If I was starting from scratch and building a PC to do this, I'd probably put a couple of extra USB cards in it. So each one allowed maximum throughput for whatever I plugged into it. So I take some of the processing away from the central processing in the computer and farm it out to a couple of USB hubs, because USB hubs cost peanuts these days. And you've got the expansion ports in the back of a desktop PC to do that. So if I was starting from scratch, that's probably what I do. But you can see from this, what I've got configured works. It is all plugged in and working. So although yes, it might give you slightly better performance, is it essential? Probably no. I think what's happening here is it's working acceptably. If you want absolute top quality, then yeah, go for separate bridges for USB and one camera per bridge.
Okay, Paul. Is there a maximum length of a USB cord?
I believe there is, and I think it's 5 meters. But I've got some 10-meter cables here with a rather large-looking plug on the end, which is supposed to be some sort of repeater, and they seem to be working fine. On both of my cameras on the mic stands, I've got 10-meter cables, because I mean, one of them, although I leave it static, initially I didn't know where I was going to put everything, so I just bought long cables. The other one, my intention with that, the camera I've got that I would use at the tailstock of the computer, of the lathe, the plan there is if I go over and do sharpening, I can take the camera with me. I've got a long enough cord to walk across the workshop with it, put it next to my grinder, and I can show what I'm doing as I'm sharpening. So just to give me added flexibility in the demo. I mean, I think that's one of the pluses for me of doing a demo in my own workshop. At a club, everything you use is what you take, and you're limited to what you've basically brought with you. Here in my own workshop, I could go over to the bandsaw and cut up a piece of wood and show how I prepare the blank. I could go over to the grinder and show my grinder setup and the jigs and things like that. And other tools I've got here, like my people have asked me questions about my dust extraction setup and things like that. So it's adding an extra element to that demo in a way, because you're actually seeing the way I set it up and the way I work normally, rather than an artificial environment where I'm at a club using somebody else's lathe effectively with a box of tools that I remembered to bring with me, and I might have forgotten 2 or 3, which for me isn't uncommon. I often improvise in demos when I've forgotten one of my tools. But yeah, that's the way it is. But so I think this does have certainly some advantages, being able to do this in my own workshop.
Okay, Paul, as well as cameras and mics, perhaps talk about lighting too.
I mean, at the moment in here, I've just got overhead fluorescence. It seems to be enough. On my lathe, I've got an LED angle poise above the lathe and another LED sort of flexible light on the end of the lathe. So when I'm turning, I will put those on. I mean, the overhead one, it's just an ordinary angle poise, but it's got a 1600 lumen bulb, which is quite a bright one. I got that from IKEA, by the way. They're about £7, something like that. And on my other lathe, again, I've got an angle poise screwed to the back of that with a bright bulb, LED bulb. So I think whatever you do, you want bright, well illuminated setup. I think the mistake a lot of people do, especially at clubs, is you have a spotlight focusing on what you're turning. That burns out and everything else is okay. So because the camera tries to average out the scene. So if you've got the rest of the scene relatively dimly lit and the focal point, which is the bit you're turning, brightly lit, the camera averages all that out, so it sees the rest of the scene okay, but the bit you're looking at is burnt out. So I think the best way to go is to try and get bright, even illumination across the whole scene, across the whole view of the camera. So whatever the camera is looking at, whether half of it's the floor or the rest of the lathe, make sure that's well lit as well as what you're actually turning. So it is important to get good lighting, yes. Here I've not added anything other than what I used for turning, and the one I did the other day, that goblet turning demo, it seemed to be well enough lit. It worked. So that was okay. I have got some camera lights, photographic lights. I've got some with very bright, I think they're actually fluorescent bulbs, these compact fluorescents, they look like a corkscrew type of bulb. And they're something like 135 watt fluorescents with reflectors. I could bring those in. I've not found the need to them. And I've also got a couple of LED panel lights that you can adjust. There's a white and a yellow knob on it, and you can adjust the color balance by adjusting those and also adjust the intensity. But again, I've not found the need to put them in here and set them up. I bought those for doing photography with. So I didn't buy them just for the demos, but although I've got the capability of adding that if I need it, I don't think I need to. I think I've got adequate lighting in the workshop as it is. But I mean, in my workshop, I've got above the lathe a double, I think they're 6-foot tubes. So 58 watts, if I remember, 58 watts each, and there's 2 in that one. There's another one at the back of the workshop with another 2, and down the far end there's 2 more, each with 2 tubes. So spread across the whole workshop, there's 4 light units with 2 tubes in each. But to be honest, the ones at the other end of the workshop aren't putting much light into what's happening at this end. But yeah, I think it is important to get it adequately lit, definitely. And broadly lit rather than spotlighted, because that's going to burn out.
Okay, Paul. Somebody suggests for a mic stand, look to your local music instrument rental shops to have a sale of old rental equipment, including mic stands, like buying a charity shop. Shop pricing, no matter the country.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, makes sense.
Okay, so someone also points out Colwyn Way uses an iPhone on Tuesdays. Sorry, the message just skipped on me there. And Thursdays from Axminster. Colwyn is doing demonstrations for Axminster using the iPhones, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Why not? I mean, most phones and tablets have got better cameras than the webcams. So yeah, there's no reason why not. Definitely, the cameras are as good, if not better, than the webcams.
Okay. Somebody also says, with long USB, I think this is over 7 meters cables, you have a chance of latency issues.
Possibly. I mean, I've not noticed it. I think you possibly will get some latency anyway because your audio and video are going in on different ports. But I mean, here, are you noticing a lag when I talk?
The hand clap is the best test of that part.
Okay.
No, that's not bad with me anyway. So
I mean, I can actually see more lag than perhaps you're detecting because I do that and I see my hands quarter of a second later. So for me, that obviously I'm not getting the latency on the audio, just on the video. So I'm really not comparing it the way you are. So, but yeah, I think it could be an influence, and also if you're using cameras over your network, there's a latency with transmitting over the network and back to your main broadcast sort of laptop or whatever it is you're using. So yeah, it is one to watch out for, and perhaps as part of your test setup, see where it is and see if you need to make any adjustments to it.
okay, yep. Somebody here has information about the cables. 5 meters for high-speed devices and 3 meters for low-speed devices.
Shouldn't that be the other way around?
I don't know, Paul. Mike Avenger, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, no, it's it's like everything else. I use USB cables up to 10 meters long for photography and don't have any issues. Much for high-speed devices, they work much better over the longer distance. So 5 meters, and USB org, the people who write the definition for what a USB port is capable of, defines it as 5 meters for a high-speed device and 3 meters for a low-speed device. But you can fudge it, and as Paul said, he's already using 10-meter cables or something, so it does work.
Yeah, I mean, I've got 2 cameras with a 10-meter cable on each, and the one that's pointing at me at the moment, I've got a 2-meter extension on that. But yeah, they all seem to be working adequately, and I mean, if that latency is a couple of microseconds, it doesn't really matter in this environment. If it's a sort of considerable delay, then yeah, obviously you're going to get that sync loss between audio and video, so then it might become a problem. But yeah, seems to be working here.
Yeah, I think with the environment that everybody here that's concerned with, it's all close proximity anyway, so I don't think that's really an issue.
Yeah.
So. Okay, so Malcolm Cleaver, I use EpocCam HD or NDI-HX apps to take video from iPhone, iPad into old Mac Mini, which is in the workshop. I also have one old webcam too. I get a lot of latency with OBS. The webcam, phone and voice can get several seconds out of sync. Anyone else have problems with latency issues?
I think with what you're saying there with NDI and effectively that's transmitting that video across your local network back to another device, you are going to get latency. That's one of the problems with video over an IP network like that. It is going to induce some latency. So unless everything has got that same delay, things are going to get out of sync.
Okay, Phil Skulltuck, he heard your clap before your hands moved.
Yeah.
Okay, Martin Dickinson, I'm getting the latency, same as you, Paul. And any problems with certain lights causing strobing on the lathe?
Yes, I mean, these overhead lights, being fluorescents, there is that strobing effect. The first time I tried my cameras and set up a very quick and dirty trial, I was getting flickering. But I went into the camera settings and found out that my cameras were set for 60 hertz. You set the main frequency on the camera, so it basically cancels out the flicker. So I set my cameras to 50 hertz because here in the UK main frequency is 50, and the flickering has pretty much gone away.
Okay.
You can still get that problem with LEDs, by the way. Some LED lights are what I don't know how many you know the electrical terminology, but what I call half-wave rectified. So instead of it conducting through the whole cycle, it only conducts for half of it. So effectively what that light is doing is it's strobing 50 or 60 times a second, depending whether it's UK or US. And again, if you've not got your camera set right, that can cause a flicker because your camera's not synced with that frequency, and you get a flicker. Another way to cancel it out sometimes is look at the frame rate that you're actually using on the camera and try adjusting it. I mean, it might be 29 frames a second, and if you change it to 25, it might be better. So just see if an adjustment of frame rate makes a difference. If you're still getting problems after setting the mains rate is. But yeah, some LED lights are continuous, so you don't get the flicker problem at all. So depends on the particular piece of hardware. But yeah, one to bear in mind, I think.
Okay, well, that's the last of the questions, Paul, but just I'm going to give you this one myself, going back to the SLR connection. As you know, I've been trying vMix and OBS and trying to make them all compatible with my MacBook because my Windows laptop is just a brick at this point. Yeah. So today I bit the bullet and I got Ecamm. So with Ecamm, I was literally able to plug my SLR straight into the system and it detected it and went on without having to get any capture cards or anything, which I also was looking at and damn near bought one. And I'm glad no, I didn't. But yeah, my SLR worked on it because I had tried downloading Nikon SLR things like you said for the Canon. Yeah. And I went through several of them and it would not work. So okay. I just plugged mine in today into the system and it's just it's working.
Yeah, I mean, it's obvious that here that the cameras have that capability to output that through the USB, but it's just the interface on the computer, isn't it? That software is obviously creating that interface on the computer end to receive it. So that's what's making the difference there. But yeah, I mean, it's just getting that right combination of the software and the hardware, isn't it? Always. Yeah. One other thing I didn't mention earlier, but I brought them in when I remembered. I've also got these. It's a magnetic base with a flexible thing. It comes with a light on it, but what I've got here is two of these flexible arms and a tripod thread on the end. So I can put that on the bed of my lathe or anywhere on the lathe, and it'll stick on with a magnet, and I can put a camera on that. I've not used them because I took the decision to have my lathes isolated from my camera's isolated from the lathe. So if I've got any vibration going on the lathe, it isn't going to be transmitted through to the cameras because they're not attached to it. And I've also got here another one. This is a slightly smaller one. It's a smaller base and a shorter arm. But what I've done is I've added a camera gimbal to it. Because one of the things with these is if you stick it on the side of your tailstock, for example, you want to bend it through 90 degrees. So what this gimbal allows me to do is to make that 90-degree bend right at the base, and it just gives me a tight bend without using up half the arm in the bend itself. And then I've got the rest of the arm to position where I want. So again, another use for a camera gimbal. This is a slightly different one. This is just like a 90-degree bend, or a bend of any angle you want through that pivot. It's not quite the same as the other gimbal, but I had that kicking around, so I thought, yeah, I'll put that on the bottom of there. So that's also one I could bring into play if I needed to. And those are companies Glowforce. Those of you who have been to Yandles have probably seen them for sale. It's quite a bright LED light, battery-powered LED light. They're not cheap. I think with the light they're about 50 quid. But you can buy just the bases without the lights. So yeah, that's it. There you go. John McNay, got one there. You see the box. But yeah, I bought the light, and I also bought at the same time an extra base, and they do a holder that will hold either a tablet or a phone, and it's an adjustable holder that you can stick more or less any tablet, any phone on it. And I've got one of those too, which I could put on the end of the. Because when I started thinking about this, I thought, oh, I could probably use my tablet as one of my recording devices, or perhaps as the only recording device. But in the end, I went down this route, and I've not used it for that yet. But you never know; it might come into play at some point.
Okay, Paul. How powerful like I'm reading what I'm seeing here, by the way, in case you think my English is a bit broken. How powerful your computer running OSB, etc., is, and will it have an impact on latency? It is tempting to use your old single-core laptop, but it might be the weak link.
If you look on Zoom's website, their recommendation is a minimum of an i5 processor with at least 2 cores, and I think 8 gigabytes of RAM is a minimum. I think anybody who's got any idea with the current operating systems like Windows 10, etc., really you want to be using 16 gigs of RAM anyway. But they say any more than that, unless you're doing heavy 3D work, you probably won't use more than 16 gigs. But I would say 16 gigabytes of RAM would be better than 8 in terms of speed. And obviously a better processor is going to give you faster throughput. I mean, this one here, it's a 5-year-old laptop. It has got 16 gigs of RAM. It's an i7 dual core, but the modern ones are a 4 or 8 core. So if you bought an i7 now, it would be twice as fast as this, I would imagine, because you've got much more in terms of processing power there with the extra cores. But yeah, look at the minimum specs for, I think both OBS and Zoom both have, I think they both recommend i5 or better in terms of processing. Yeah.
Okay. You need to ensure your camera will put out a clean HDMI feed, i.e. no screen text, before buying any converter or cam link type kit. My Sony NEX6 won't.
Yeah, I mean, some cameras you can configure what's on the screen and turn bits off, because what you're seeing usually is the preview image. That, I mean, you know, you've got a little screen on the back of the camera. What some put out on that USB is what you see on there. So you've got all the camera controls and numbers that, like exposures and things like that. So it maybe you can't turn all that off, but it varies a lot between cameras. I mean, plugging in my SLR camera, there isn't anything on the screen. It's just a clean picture of what the camera's looking at without any clutter and images. Yes, you could probably turn things on if you wanted to add them, but you probably wouldn't. So yeah, it's probably worth checking out what that camera can do, especially if you've already got it, you're sort of stuck with what you've got. If you're going to go out and buy another one, it's probably cheaper just to go out and buy a webcam instead, because you can get the webcam for a lot less than the cost of a good SLR, can't you?
Okay, just for anybody that's not watching the chat box, if you click on the chat, it will pop up. There are people are putting some links into it there for different things. If I click on any of the links, it'll just take me out of the page. But they're all relative to the questions in the area. So if you're looking to just go back through the chat there, you'll get some more information, okay? Copy and paste them, whatever. Or if you click on the 3 dots at the bottom right-hand corner of the chat box, you will get the option to save the chat. And you can save all of the talk that's been in it. If you've been listening to Paul, I've missed some of the comments and things there that have been written out. Because I'm not reading them all out, because some of them are just facts people are putting across that Paul has covered. Yeah. So,
but as I said earlier, I've written an article which will be in Revolutions for those who are going to get that. And that's, for those of you that don't know, that's the magazine that goes out to all the AWGB members. So if you want to subscribe to that, join the AWGB for £18 a year, and you'll get copies of it. But I will put that article online in the next few days, and I'll put a link to it from the AWGB Facebook and website. So a lot of what we've talked about here is in that, in some areas in an abbreviated form. But I think I did look at the performance specs for both OBS and Zoom. Those are in the article. I remember looking them up and putting them in. And also just there's a section on cameras and microphones and stands and accessories and things like that. So I tried to cover all those essential areas that everybody's going to want to know about. It doesn't go into detail into how to use the software, because that was just going to make it too much for one article, I think. But I might add that into a second one.
Okay, Paul. And just for people that are interested, Paul will be publishing these Meet the Turners and other sessions when he gets a chance to edit them. I presumably, Paul, the AWGB page will be the first stop.
Yeah, there'll be links on there. So yeah, once I get round to getting them on there, I'll add the links.